Why status matters more than money. A manager gets promoted. She now runs the team she used to be part of. Same office, same people, same work. But something changes immediately. When she walks into the break room, the conversation shifts. Not obviously, just a slight pause. A change in tone. Someone wraps up a complaint they were in the middle of making. Another person adjusts their posture. She notices it. They notice it. No one mentions it. In the next team meeting, she makes a suggestion. It's the same kind of suggestion she made last month. But this time, no one counters it. No one asks a follow-up question to test the idea. They just nod. Someone writes it down. Later, she sends an email asking for an update on a project. It gets answered in 20 minutes. Before the promotion, that same kind of email might have sat for a day or two. Nothing was said about any of this. No one decided to act differently. But everything is different. Her paycheck went up a little, but that's not what changed the room. What is happening here? Status is your position in a social structure relative to others. It is not the same as money, though money can create it. It is not the same as authority, though authority usually carries it. It is not the same as respect, though people often confuse the two. Status determines how much space you take up in a room, how much attention people give your words, how long you can make someone wait, how much access you have to others' time, decisions, and goodwill. It shapes what people assume about you before you speak. It changes what your silence means. It alters how the same sentence lands depending on who says it. And people will often trade money for status, or accept less money to preserve it, because status affects something deeper than purchasing power. It affects how you are treated every single day, how status forms in ordinary life. Status comes from differences in access, dependence, and risk. You have higher status when other people need something from you more than you need something from them. When you control access to resources, opportunities, or decisions. When you can afford to walk away and they cannot. This happens in small ways constantly. A landlord has status over a tenant because the tenant needs the apartment more than the landlord needs that particular tenant. If the tenant complains, the landlord can take their time responding. If the landlord has a request, the tenant usually answers quickly. A hiring manager has status over a job candidate because the candidate needs the job more than the manager needs that specific candidate. The candidate prepares extensively for a 30-minute conversation. The manager glances at a resume right before the meeting starts. A tenured professor has status over an untenured one because the untenured professor's career depends on evaluation by people like the tenured professor. The untenured professor is careful about what they say in meetings. The tenured professor speaks freely. Status is not always about formal roles. It can come from informal control over access. A person who knows everyone in an industry has status because they control introductions. A person who is well-liked in a social group has status because others seek their approval. A person with a large audience has status because they can direct attention. The key is asymmetry. One person can affect the other more than the other can affect them. And once that asymmetry exists, behavior changes even when no one intends it to. How status changes communication. Status changes how people speak, when they speak, and what they assume their words will do. Timing and response speed. High-status people can make others wait. Low-status people cannot. When a senior leader sends an email, It gets answered within the hour. When a junior employee sends an email to that same leader, it might get answered in 3 days. Or never. This is not because the leader is busier. It is because the junior employee's time is assumed to be more available. Their waiting is treated as normal. The leader's waiting is treated as a problem. The junior employee checks their inbox constantly after sending the email. They wonder if they worded it wrong. They consider sending a follow-up, but worry it will seem pushy. They wait. The leader does not think about the email again until they happen to see it. No one decided this should happen. It is just how status works. Word choice and hedging. Low-status people soften their statements. High-status people do not need to. A junior team member says, "I was just wondering if maybe we could consider trying a different approach. I might be wrong, but it seems like there could be another option. What do you think?" A senior team member says, "We should try a different approach." Same idea, different status, different phrasing. The junior team member is managing risk. They are not sure if their idea will be well received. They are not sure if they have the standing to make the suggestion. So they build in escape routes. They make it easy for others to dismiss the idea without dismissing them. The senior team member does not need escape routes. They assume their ideas will be taken seriously. So they state them directly. People often interpret this as a difference in confidence. But it is usually a difference in safety. The junior team member is not less confident in their idea. They are less confident that offering it will go well for them. Length and explanation. Low-status people over-explain. High-status people do not need to. When a contractor sends an invoice to a client, they include a detailed breakdown. They list every hour. They explain every charge. They anticipate questions. When the client pays, they just send the payment. No explanation. No breakdown of where the money came from or why it took 3 days. The contractor is managing the expectation that their request will be questioned. The client is not managing that expectation because they do not need to. Their actions are assumed to be reasonable by default. This pattern shows up everywhere. A student emails a professor with 3 paragraphs explaining why they need an extension. The professor replies, "Okay." An assistant schedules a meeting with their boss and sends a paragraph about why the meeting is needed. The boss schedules a meeting with the assistant and just sends a calendar invite. The person with lower status anticipates resistance. So they explain. The person with higher status does not anticipate resistance. So they do not. Silence and what it means. Silence means different things depending on who is silent. When a senior leader is silent in a meeting, people assume they are thinking. They wait. They interpret the silence as strategic or thoughtful. When a junior team member is silent in a meeting, people assume they have nothing to contribute, or that they are disengaged, or that they are not confident enough to speak. Same silence, different interpretation. This makes silence risky for low-status people. They cannot afford to be quiet because their silence will be read as absence. But speaking carries risk too. If they speak too much, they are seen as overstepping. If they speak too little, they are seen as not contributing. High-status people do not face this problem. Their silence is assumed to be purposeful. Their presence is assumed to be valuable even when they are not speaking. Who gets interrupted? High-status people get interrupted less. When they do get interrupted, the interruption is treated as a mistake and people apologize. Low status people get interrupted more. When they get interrupted, it is treated as normal. No one apologizes. The conversation just moves on. This is not because high status people have more important things to say. It is because their speech is treated as more costly to disrupt. Interrupting them is a social risk. Interrupting someone with lower status is not. A CEO gets interrupted in a meeting. The person who interrupted them immediately says, "Sorry, go ahead." Everyone waits. An intern gets interrupted in the same meeting. No one says sorry. The conversation continues in the new direction. The intern does not finish their point. This teaches people where they stand without anyone saying it directly. How people can misread status behavior. People often mistake status-driven behavior for personality traits. When someone is quiet in meetings, people assume they are shy or introverted. They do not consider that the person might be calculating risk, that they might speak freely in other settings where the status difference is smaller. When someone over-explains, people assume they are insecure or lack confidence. They do not consider that the person is responding to a pattern of being questioned or dismissed, that they are protecting themselves. When someone takes a long time to reply to emails, people assume they are disorganized or rude. They do not consider that the person might be responding to the volume of requests that come with low status, that they are managing unequal expectations. When someone is careful with their words, people assume they are not direct or honest. They do not consider that directness might be expensive for them, that they are navigating consequences others do not face. This misreading has consequences. A manager sees a junior employee who hedges their suggestions and concludes that the employee is not confident enough for leadership. But the hedging is a response to being low status. If the employee is promoted, the hedging often disappears. The behavior was not a personality trait, it was a strategy. A team sees a senior leader who speaks bluntly and interrupts others and concludes that the leader is confident and decisive. But the bluntness is enabled by high status. If the same person were in a room with people of higher status, their behavior would change. The behavior is not a stable trait. It is a response to context. People also mistake status for competence. When a high-status person makes a suggestion, people assume it is a good suggestion. They do not question it as much. They look for reasons to agree with it. When a low-status person makes a suggestion, people assume it needs scrutiny. They look for problems. They wait to see if others agree before committing their own agreement. This means high-status people get more credit for their ideas, even when the ideas are mediocre. And low-status people get less credit, even when their ideas are strong. Over time, this creates a feedback loop. High-status people get more opportunities. Their ideas get implemented. They get more visibility. Their status grows. Low-status people get fewer opportunities. Their ideas get ignored or credited to others. They stay invisible. Their status stays low or declines. Why money does not work the same way. Money can buy things. It cannot buy the way people treat you in a room. A person can have a lot of money and still be low status in certain contexts. A wealthy person who is new to a social group still has to prove themselves. A wealthy person who is younger than others in a professional setting still gets treated as junior. A wealthy person who lacks formal credentials still gets questioned. Money can create status, but only if it comes with access, visibility, or control over what others need. A person who made money in real estate might have no status in an academic environment. A person who inherited wealth might have no status in a room full of self-made entrepreneurs. A person who has money but no social connections might struggle to get meetings, invitations, or attention. Status requires recognition from the group. Money does not guarantee that. This is why people will often take less money in exchange for a more respected role, or stay in a lower-paying job that gives them visibility and influence, or spend money to be part of certain groups or organizations. They are trading financial resources for social positioning. An executive takes a pay cut to join a more prestigious company. The money matters less than the brand on their resume and the access that comes with it. A consultant charges less to work with a high-profile client. The immediate income matters less than the credibility and the referrals that will follow. A person pays to join an exclusive club or attend an expensive conference. They are not buying the event. They are buying proximity to people who can change their status. This makes sense because status compounds in ways money does not. Money is transactional. You spend it and it is gone. Status creates access that leads to more status. It opens doors that lead to other doors. It shapes opportunities that are not available at any price. How status operates in different contexts. Status is not fixed. It changes depending on context. A person can have high status at work and low status in their family, high status in one industry and low status in another, high status in one social group and invisible in the next. This is why people often feel disoriented when they move between contexts. A senior leader at a company joins a board full of other senior leaders. Suddenly, they are the least experienced person in the room. The behaviors that worked before do not work anymore. They have to rebuild. A professor who is well known in their field goes to a party where no one has heard of them. Their expertise does not translate. They are just another person. A parent who has authority at home goes to their child's school and becomes a supplicant. They wait for meetings. They defer to teachers. They manage their words carefully. People often underestimate how much their behavior is context-dependent. They think their confidence or assertiveness or directness is a personality trait. Then they enter a context where their status is lower, and they find themselves acting completely differently. This does not mean they are being fake. It means they are responding to social reality. How status grows or fades. Status is maintained through patterns of interaction. It is not permanent. High-status people maintain their status by behaving in ways that reinforce it. They take space. They speak with certainty. They make others wait. They assume their ideas will be taken seriously. If they stop doing these things, their status would start to fade. People would begin to question their authority. Others would start to challenge them more. The deference would decrease. Low-status people stay low status when they continue to signal deference, when they wait too long to speak, when they apologize too much, when they over-explain or hedge or soften every suggestion. This does not mean they are doing something wrong. It means they are responding to real risks. But the behavior also reinforces the pattern. The way to shift status is to change the pattern gradually, not by faking confidence or ignoring risk, but by testing the edges of the role, speaking a little more directly, waiting a little less, taking up slightly more space, seeing what happens. Often, nothing bad happens. People adjust. The new behavior becomes normal. Status shifts. But this requires knowing when and where to push. Push too hard in the wrong context, and you lose the status you have. Push too softly, and nothing changes. The people who navigate this best are the ones who read the room, who know when they have enough credibility to be direct, who know when they need to build more trust before making a move. They are not playing games. They are responding to social structure, and they are learning to shape it instead of only reacting to it. Why this matters in ordinary interactions. Status is operating constantly, even in small interactions. When you send a text and the other person replies immediately, you have status in that exchange. When you send a text and wait hours for a reply, they have status. When you suggest a restaurant and the other person agrees without offering an alternative, you have status. When you suggest a restaurant and they counter with another option, the status is more balanced. When you ask a question and the other person gives a full, thoughtful answer, they are giving you their time and attention. When you ask a question and they give a short or dismissive answer, they are signaling that your question is not a priority. None of this is inherently good or bad, but it shapes the relationship. People who are always the ones waiting, always the ones adjusting, always the ones explaining themselves, start to feel the imbalance, even if they cannot name it. People who are always the ones being waited for, always the ones being accommodated, always the ones whose preferences are assumed to matter more, rarely notice the imbalance. It feels normal to them. This is why status is hard to talk about. The people who benefit from it often do not see it. The people who are constrained by it are hyper-aware of it, but worry that naming it will make them seem difficult or overly sensitive. Why status is invisible to those who have it. High-status people do not think about status as much because they are not navigating around it constantly. When your words are taken seriously by default, you do not spend time thinking about how to phrase things so they will be heard. You just say what you think. When people reply to your emails quickly, you do not spend time wondering if you are being ignored or if you worded something wrong. You just assume the message got through. When your presence in a room is valued, you do not think about whether you should speak or stay quiet. You speak when you have something to say. This makes high status feel like neutrality. It does not feel like an advantage. It feels like the way things are supposed to work. Low status people, on the other hand, are always aware of status. They have to be. It determines what they can say, how they can say it, and what will happen if they get it wrong. This creates a gap in perception. The high-status person thinks everyone is operating on a level playing field. They think people are quiet because they have nothing to say. They think people are indirect because they are not confident. They think people are careful because they are not good at communication. The low-status person knows that the playing field is not level. They know they are quiet because speaking carries risk. They know they are indirect because directness has been punished before. They know they are careful because carelessness is expensive. But explaining this to someone with high status is hard. It often sounds like complaining, or like making excuses, or like being overly focused on hierarchy. And because the high-status person does not experience the constraints, they have trouble believing the constraints are real. What happens when status is disrupted? Sometimes status shifts suddenly. A promotion, a demotion, a public success or failure, a change in organizational structure. When this happens, everyone has to adjust. The person whose status changed has to learn new behavior. The people around them have to recalibrate how they interact. This is why newly promoted people often feel disoriented. They are treated differently, but they still think of themselves the same way. They still expect resistance or questions that no longer come. They still over-explain or hedge when they do not need to. It takes time to learn that the rules have changed, that their words carry more weight now, that they can be more direct, that people will wait for them. The opposite is also true. When someone loses status, they often do not realize it at first. They keep behaving the way they always did. They assume their words will still carry the same weight. They assume people will still respond quickly, but people do not. And the person starts to feel a subtle shift. Emails take longer to get answered. Suggestions get questioned more. Invitations dry up. Conversations end sooner. They might interpret this as a personal rejection, as people turning against them. But often it is just a structural shift. The role changed, the access changed, the status changed, and everyone is responding to the new structure. Closing reflection. Status is not about who is better or more valuable. It is about who has leverage in a particular context. Who can make others wait? Who controls access? Who can afford to be direct and who cannot? Most people do not think about this explicitly, but they respond to it constantly. They adjust their behavior without deciding to. They read the room and act accordingly. The person who notices this can start to see patterns they missed before. They can see why some people seem confident and others seem hesitant, and recognize that the difference might not be internal. They can see why their own behavior changes depending on who they are talking to, and realize they are not being inconsistent. They are navigating structure, and they can start to make different choices, not by ignoring status, but by understanding it well enough to work with it instead of just reacting to it.